And joining us this morning to talk about that and a lot more, angel investor and Inside.com founder Jason Calacanis. Jason, good morning.
Nice to be back.
First, though, we want to get your reaction to this headline we covered last week about Zirtual, one of your investments. Article actually mentions you by name. It's been used as an example of a trend of startups that are suddenly running out of patience when it comes to their investors. Is this true?
So Zirtual was a really strong company doing an $11 million a year run rate with probably $4 million a year in losses, which would put it in, an elite category here in the Valley, investing to get growth, and I would say on the way to being a unicorn. And it was just very unfortunate. You had a product that people loved, and you had an employee base that loved doing it. But there was a little bit of mismanagement on the board and, with the finances. And they went down to the last minute to raise their funding in the summer. Some investors pulled out. This happens from time to time. It's not an overarching trend in our industry, but it does happen. It's a very difficult game, the startup game, and sometimes funding gets pulled at the last minute and companies go out of business. The good news is the company's been purchased, and I spoke to the founder yesterday, and 10% of the clients and employees are back to work, and I think they're going to make the business profitable relatively quickly, and they'll get back to where they are probably within a year to 18 months. So it's a big boy game, big girl game. These things happen.
Jason, my question to you, though, is are you doing anything differently because of what happened here? I mean, it seems like Zirtual said, hey, we didn't have a CFO full-time. That was an issue. The person who we had was counting 24 pay periods instead of 26. That was an issue. Our board members were not their eye wasn't on the board, on the ball as much as it should have been. We didn't have enough board members. I mean, as an investor, are you going back through your portfolio and seeing, are there any red flags similar to Zirtual, and have you found any?
Yeah, so it's a great point. I am amongst the biggest pain in the ass angel investors on the planet. I require my companies to send me a monthly update on how much cash they have in the bank, how many months of runway, and when they're going to be cash out, because as an angel, I want to try to avoid those situations. The number one reason companies die is because the founder quits, and the number two reason because they run out of money. And so you don't really need to have a CFO at a 10 or 20 or 30 person company. But what happened with Zirtual was it grew so quickly in 3 years to 450 employees, they should have had a CFO in place. I wasn't on the board. I was a minor investor. But it's definitely got me thinking about, hey, when these things start to break out, we need to put more controls in place earlier to help the founders. And this was a first-time founder, and she did an amazing job, and I would invest in her again.
All right, that's a good defense, Jason. Well, in the meantime, let's move to this immigration reform battle. Trump, as you know, wants to increase wages for H-1B visa employees, saying, quote, this will improve the number of black, Hispanic, and female workers in Silicon Valley who've been passed over in favor of the H-1B program. Mark Zuckerberg's personal senator, he says, Marco Rubio, has the bill to triple H-1Bs that would decimate women and minorities. I don't think you agree with that, and it sounds like you have solutions separate from that. Talk about it.
Sure. Yeah, so the H-1B visa program does have some abuses in it where people are trying to hire people for low wages. I've been involved in discussions where I've heard people say, hey, can we get somebody with an H-1B visa and pay less in terms of salary? And this is Trump at his finest. He is bringing in, the politics of race and the politics of jobs and xenophobia. This is like the most amazing job he's done yet in being divisive and capturing the attention of the country, I think. Now, the bottom 20 or 30% of H-1B visas are being used, I think, and being abused. But the top amount of them are because we need skilled laborers here, and we want all the smart people in the world in our country. We're talking about 75,000 people getting these a year or so, and maybe increasing it to 300,000. It's actually a de minimis number. It's not very relevant. But what it is it's a divisive issue that Trump can ride pretty effectively. And has Zuckerberg and the rest of the tech industry gotten super involved and bought a lot of politicians? Of course they have. And the tech industry is catching up with the other industries which have bought and sold Washington. So Trump's right about a couple of things. But there are some solutions to this problem.
Trump on the stump has seemed to say that he buys politicians quite often himself. So I'm not sure how much of an insult this is to have a personal senator. But I wonder, is he right on the substance here than you're saying? Because I hear about the outsourcing companies that take on a lot of these H-1B workers. There was a story about Disney just a few weeks ago laying off a bunch of people and taking on H-1Bs from an outsourcing company. That's a concern, isn't it? If they had higher pay, might that not solve some of these problems?
Absolutely. So what we have is there's two different groups of people. There's outsourced IT, and in America, the IT industry created jobs worth $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 a year. Amazing jobs for Americans. At the same time, places like India started to grow, and the people there are very intelligent and very driven, and they were willing to do the jobs for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year. So we outsource there. And the H-1B visa is a way of insourcing and paying those people, let's say, $75,000. What we're dealing with is globalization, and the H-1B visa is a way of sort of gaming the globalization that's occurring in the world. If we shut the system down, all those jobs will just go overseas. So we don't want that either. There has to be a little bit of a balance here, and there's a very easy solution, which is, why don't we auction these off to tech companies and make them pay a free market rate for them? So let's say Zuckerberg wants to pay $50,000 and Infosys wants to pay only $20,000. Infosys would be out of the running for bringing talent into the country because they're doing it to arbitrage the IT salaries. Whereas Zuckerberg and startups and VCs and investors like myself, we're bringing people in to create jobs. So there's one part of this puzzle, the H-1B visa, is bringing intelligent PhDs, brilliant founders to this country to create dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of jobs. And then there's people hacking the system to move IT jobs. We need to separate those two, a free market where people auction off the H-1B visas for $75,000, $100,000 and earmark that money for retraining of Americans.
I mean, you're parsing
Easy
it,
solution.
and you're parsing it in ways that make sense. We're in primary season, though, Jason, and we know how these headlines play.
Yeah, I'm sorry for being logical and explaining the issue in a deft way, as opposed to Trump, which gets much more headlines.
Jason, appreciate that very much. That's debate's far from actually really just getting started in this cycle. We'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Jason Calacanis joining us talking about politics and a lot more.